right away you notice that I'm lacking a key piece of equipment for a Templar Knight or any knight. I'm lacking a horse. Everything I'm wearing is designed to make me an effective and deadly warrior on horseback. It's not meant to get me from point A to point B on foot in comfort, and I'm certainly not in comfort. Quick history lesson. When the Knights of the First Crusade were successful in conquering several cities in the Holy Land, they carved out 4 new kingdoms. The County of Edessa, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, and the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And historians call those states together the Crusader states. But I prefer the term that was used in the Middle Ages. They called those Crusader states the kingdoms of Outremer. Outremer being a term meaning the lands beyond the sea. After the kingdoms of Outremer were formed, the crusading princes and noblemen who wound up in charge of these new kingdoms realized that they had a problem, which is they had enough troops to control the principal cities like, say, Jerusalem or Antioch, but they had nowhere near enough men or wealth to patrol or control the roads between these cities and their new kingdoms. So these roads became known as havens for brigands. Chronicles of the time talk about that you could recognize the road to Jerusalem because it was lined in the bones, the bleached bones of pilgrims who had been attacked by brigands along the way. And that problem was solved to a certain degree by the formation of a new military order called the Knights Templar. Now, the Knights Templar started out like other crusaders. They had taken a vow to go on an armed pilgrimage to free the city of Jerusalem from Saracen rule. Once they got here, certain knights decided that they really wanted to live basically a monastic religious life, but they didn't want to give up their fighting skills. So what they wound up doing is kind of forming a kind of warrior monk society. And they were charged with protecting pilgrims on the pilgrim road to Jerusalem. You know, it's been said that you could recognize a knight of the medieval ages by his build, which is he had a very powerful upper body. And walking in this, and I'm sure watching me walk in this, you begin to understand why. Just the strength needed to wear this and do nothing more strenuous than move one foot in front of another. That strength is considerable. Now consider what you would need to fight, to wear this in battle, especially considering that you don't just ride off directly into battle. You have to get to the battle, and the battle could last for hours. The strength needed, the stamina, the endurance must have been incredible. There's no knight symbol on there. One piece of equipment I wouldn't mind removing right now is actually everything you see up here. You know, I've always heard that if you want to cool down quickly, take off a hat. And, you know, your hat is trapping heat on your body. Well, I've basically got 3 hats on, because not only do I have what is considered a nasal helm, I've got a coif, which is a chainmail hood, and under that I have a padded hood to basically keep the metal chains from digging into my skin, but also when I get hit in the head, which is not outside the realm of possibility, to kind of cushion the blow a little bit. All of which is great in combat, but as far as releasing heat, it's a killer. Knights of any period really spent all of the day in training, and they did that simply because it was necessary to survive. when I have done mock combats wearing chainmail, it doesn't take long before it is all you can do to lift your sword. You start using your shield quite a bit more. And then, you know, it doesn't take long before you start going, I'm done. I've got to have some kind of break. So imagining the strength of these men, just the physical stamina, is mind-boggling. You know, it does occur to me, though, that the Templar Knight that I'm role-playing as and myself actually are sharing at least one similarity beyond what we're wearing. And that similarity is we're doing something uncomfortable that is unfamiliar to us. A knight would not have been walking in full chainmail for a whole lot of distance. They rode. So one similarity that's facing both myself and my alter ego here is we have a lack of water. A Knight Templar was not like a modern soldier. No knight was. They were noblemen. They were aristocrats. They were not carrying supplies. They were not setting up their own tents. They were not carrying their own food for the most part. They had squires and sergeants at arms to do that. So I have essentially a hardened leather skin of water. And whether it's Texas or the lands around Jerusalem, something tells me that when you're wearing chainmail in the sun, that's not going to be enough. You know, someone might say, well, why don't you take some of the armor off, the chainmail off? If you're trying to get from point A to point B quickly, you need to divest yourself of some of your armor. The problem is, first, I'm really carrying this armor in the most efficient way possible right now by wearing it. There really isn't another great way to do it that would save me time and effort. Second, I'm a lone Templar Knight on the Pilgrim Road. I have no idea when I might be attacked by brigands. And I can tell you from experience, putting on this armor, it's not as easy as just like slipping on a t-shirt. It takes a good amount of time. So, you know, for those folks who are saying, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? This is really the most efficient way possible to get from point A to point B and stay alive. Whenever you watch films from this time period, it's always a little bit like a game of tag. Anytime the swords come out, and the first time a sword touches someone else, that someone else instantly dies. And that, of course, couldn't be further from historical reality. The historical reality is that all of this was designed so that I could take blows and keep fighting. A sword hits me or an axe hits me, the chainmail and the gambeson should protect me. Now, it doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. You find out that during this time, battle wounds are not the slices and the cuts that you're expecting. They are smashed and crushed and broken bones because the armor has done its job and kept a limb attached to the body. But the momentum of, say, an axe swinging at your arm can only be absorbed so much. One of the legends of the Knights Templar is that they lived longer than other knights of their day. And there are elements of truth to this. You could attribute it to their monastic diet, a monastic lifestyle. They are not feasting. They're living and eating very, very sparsely. They're living very fit lives. But it would be impossible to talk about the longevity of a Templar Knight without talking about the elixir of Jerusalem. The elixir of Jerusalem was watered down wine. The Templar Knights were actually noted at their time for being very abstemious when it came to alcohol. And this is a time when drinking, say, wine was safer than actually drinking water, because water could be contaminated where alcohol would not have been. But Knights Templar were actually known for abstaining. If they drank wine, it was incredibly watered down. The elixir of Jerusalem was not only watered down wine, but it had pulped aloe vera in it. And it's theorized that the antiseptic properties of the aloe vera, when you're ingesting it quite often, as the elixir of Jerusalem was ingested by Templar Knights, could actually have, say, healing effects and essentially good health effects for the Knights Templar that other knights and denizens of the medieval age didn't have. So bread would have been one of the easiest things to carry. Now, most Europeans would have been used to a darker bread, barley type bread, because wheat was scarce and kind of reserved for noblemen. But in the Holy Land, wheat was actually much more plentiful. So it truly was kind of a land of milk and honey, or at least milk and white bread for crusading knights and crusading armies, because white bread was plentiful. Protein would have been a big part of a knight's diet, a Templar knight's diet. Beans, vegetables, those were pretty common. But out on a patrol, something that I might have scavenged quickly from a sergeant of arms saddlebags would have been something they would have carried almost like just in case food. Something like, say, dried fish. You're near the Sea of Galilee. Fish, smoked dried fish, was common in a Templar's diet. So I've gone this whole time without drawing my sword. So this is the typical weapon of, say, a Templar Knight, or really any knight of the crusading era. Now, sword is kind of it's a unique item. Most of the elements of warfare in the medieval age, an axe, a bow and arrow, a hatchet, a spear, even a knife, they actually have practical usages, whether in the fields or on the hunt. A sword is useless outside of battle. You're not going to use a sword to till a field. So it is kind of ultimately a frivolous purchase in the medieval ages. But of course, there is no frivolity in the medieval ages either. To be able to have frivolity means you have money. So a sword is a status symbol for these people, which means that they're not going to discard it to lighten the weight. I've been carrying it this whole march, and all it's done is hang off my waist. But a knight would never discard it. It's funny, I'm using the hilt of my sword far more as almost like a walking stick or a prop to just kind of lean my hand against to give me some support than anything else. I was just thinking that this get up at least takes care of a problem I have with traditional hiking, which is when I get tired, I tend to look at my feet, and where I'm walking and I miss the scenery. Well, I'm not doing that now, even though I'm twice as tired. Because if I put my head down, I'm afraid it's not going to raise back up. Yeah, we're gonna reiterate what we said before. An unhorsed knight is seriously in jeopardy. Unless they're in superhuman shape, or at least better shape than I am.